From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm News Channel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. As we begin our second decade of hosting this show, we kick off 2017 by welcoming Nashville Mayor Megan Barry back to the show. Mayor, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Pat. Thanks for having me back.
Appreciate you being able to be available to us on the show. If you ask most Nashvilleians what they'd like to see most in 2017, it's probably less traffic and less traffic congestion. Now, late last year, your office announced something that was done pretty quickly, but looks to be pretty effectively. You've recycled, rechanged, or recalibrated over 500 traffic lights. What's that all about?
Well, you know, clearly we've got a big strategy on moving people around Nashville that's going to take a lot more years to implement. That's that $6 billion transit plan. But in the short run, we got to do stuff immediately.
I'm reminded that I think the morning after you were elected, I said to you, what do you have to do the first year? And you said, well, I have to move the needle somewhere on traffic, and I have to look for low-hanging fruit. This is the low-hanging fruit?
It is, and I think that folks out there will have seen some differences on their commutes. Those timings of lights originally were going to take 2 years. I worked with the Public Works Department to say we got to do a lot faster than that. How did you, having worked in a mayor's office, I know a lot of times the people come from the departments and say, well, we just can't, that's going to take this much time, and that's much longer than you want. Well, I think that when you are explaining the urgency, it's beneficial, and of course they're driving in too.
Their hearts and minds follow.
That's right.
So there are more than 500 traffic lights in Nashville. People are hearing about how well this is working, and I drive in one of those corridors every day. I can tell you that it does seem to be making a difference. So when's phase 2?
So phase 2 is now. So now we're identifying the next round of lights that we need to do, and you'll continue to see that roll out throughout all of Davidson County.
Now, traffic patterns change as new developments come in, other things change and go around. So are you going to continue to monitor and retweak these as you go forward?
So some of the additional technology that we've been able to add allows us to do this much more quickly. I mean, a lot of our technology was old, so part of the timing was also to put in new boxes that will allow us to do this immediately.
You're also implementing or starting to implement a retiming of lights so that when one of the rapid transit buses is coming through, they'll automatically get the green light. How does that work, and how quickly is that going to start happening?
Well, I mean, as you know, you're not going to get on a bus if the bus is moving at the same pace as the traffic. So what we want to do is get folks on those buses, and those buses will have that access to go through those lights much quicker.
A lot of people don't like to be behind those buses in the morning and afternoon commutes. Now you're telling me people maybe want to be behind one of those buses because the light will be green for them.
You want to get it through, exactly.
Now, you also last year announced an intersection program that you were going to start doing some improvements in that again to try to help with traffic flow and things. I have not heard much about that after it was announced. How's that coming along?
We identified 16 intersections that either had significant traffic and or pedestrian safety issues. We've already moved on several of those to do some of the infrastructure upgrades, and we're on track to complete those 16 in the next year.
You also mentioned, I looked back in some of our earlier conversations, that you wanted to develop some sort of real-time traffic app for people to put on their smartphones. How's that coming along?
Well, you know, Waze, if you've ever used Waze, you can absolutely, it already exists. But what I think I had mentioned was about the bus, and we have that transit app now where if you actually look at the bus, you can see when the bus is coming, when the bus will get there, and that makes it a whole lot easier.
But other traffic congestion sort of things, that you haven't put that into it as well. Right now it's basically focused on the bus system.
But Waze is a great app that can get you all around.
Now, with all the emphasis that you're having, or it seems to be having, based on what's being generated in terms of news stories and things about traffic and congestion, do you sort of feel like you've been elected to be the traffic engineer in chief for Nashville and maybe to some degree for the region?
Well, clearly this is a regional issue, and I think that the good news is that the mayors who are part of all of this region, we're all committed to the same thing, which is making sure people can get in and out of our counties effectively and efficiently. And so, you know, we've got the governor's plan and proposal coming down the pike, and that's a lot of what we're focused on.
Well, there seems to be a lot of proposals going to be coming up to the legislature, some for the gas tax, some perhaps for this larger 25-year plan that's going to cost multi-billion dollars. And then some lawmakers like here in Nashville are coming up with their own plans that are somewhat similar. Are you worried that there's going to be a lot of traffic congestion up there trying to have all these different plans out there? And who's going to sort that all out?
Well, We are absolutely committed to making sure that whomever is bringing forward legislation that we're working with for enabling legislation. We really, in Davidson County and in the region, need the ability to raise that $6 billion, and that's got to be part of the conversation.
The John Ray Clemens plan that's up there for the national representative also would seem to take some of the sales tax money as it grows, and it would go over into transportation. There would actually be money set aside for mass transit within the gas tax, which is not there right now.
Right.
Are you worried you're going to get involved in these turf fights, or are you just strictly going to focus on what happens on the enabling legislation, which lets each county decide what they'd like to have their voters approve for a transit plan?
That's what we want. We want to be able to go to the voters in Davidson County and say, this is our proposal, our funding mechanisms, and we need you to vote and say yes.
Now, you are going to announce your preferences for what Nashville's mass transit funding source ought to be, and then you decided at the end of the year not to be able to do that. Said it would be several months away. What's been the delay?
Well, we absolutely have a laundry list of places that we can go for those funding, and the Chamber put together a pretty comprehensive look at that. You know, we haven't differentiated what would work and what wouldn't yet, because we actually need that enabling legislation for a lot of those pieces.
Now, back during the mayor's race, I remember being with you at one of the candidate forums, and you raised the possibility on your own that perhaps the continuing or remaining amount of money that the local sales tax could be raised here. I think it's still about
it's got a
half a cent,
yeah.
And we could still raise that, and that could go, if voters approved, for mass transit, and it wouldn't have any impact on our funding for schools. It would not be required that part of the sales tax go to schools. Is that still one of your preferences for possibly use?
You know, what we want to be able to do is go to the voters and say, what do you all want to see? And clearly having the ability to take that and say, are you prepared to have dedicated funding from a specific sales tax to transit? I think the key is you've got to make the connection to voters on what it's going to fund. If you just ask for additional funding, folks want to know what exactly am I getting, and that's the conversation we're going to have.
Nashville Mayor Megan Barry is our guest. We're talking transit and other issues facing Metro government as we go into 2017. Back to continue our conversation with the mayor after you watch these messages.